Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Sasha Chikova. I'm a marketing manager here at Witham. Today we'll be talking about accelerating your Microsoft 365 adoption journey with some tools that you already have access to. Really quickly, just a few housekeeping items. We are recording the webinar, so we will provide a link to the recording and the slide deck later this afternoon. We're going to try to stick to about a 45-minute session, 50 minutes to leave plenty of time for questions. So as you have questions come up, don't hold back. You can submit them throughout the session in the questions tab of the GoToWebinar control panel. And we'll likely leave the questions towards the end, but send them on in and we'll get to them at the end of the session. And joining me today, I have Lamia from our Witham Digital Solutions team. And Lamia, I think we're ready to get started.
Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lamia Msedek. I am with Witham Smith & Brown as a modern workplace adoption specialist. I will say that my main motto, if you ever get to have a chance to chat with me one-on-one, is that it doesn't matter what technology is being released if your people aren't on board. So with that, I am a ProSci change practitioner as well as a Microsoft adoption specialist. I'm excited that you all have joined me today. So as far as the webinar, what we're going to cover are a couple of different areas within the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So some of the tools I'm going to introduce you to are the productivity score, usage reporting, and your message center. And then I'm going to walk through how you can get access, assuming that you're a decision maker, maybe a CEO in the C-suite, and you're not necessarily in IT that may already have access. And then at the end, I'm going to try to help you envision how you can bring all of these tools together into your adoption plan. So before we get started, I'm really curious if any of you have reviewed your Microsoft 365 reporting, whether that's the productivity score, your usage reporting, or your message center. So this will help me gauge where you are and your understanding in these topics. So the poll is open and feel free to respond.
All right, looks like the majority of people have voted and they're in the right place. It looks like more than half of our attendees, Lamia, have not reviewed the reporting yet.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's perfect. I'm going to pretty much keep it at a high level today, but a little bit in depth where I can for those of you that are familiar. All right, so before I get started, one thing, caveat that and quote, one of my favorite quotes when we're talking about digital transformation is, when digital transformation is done right, it's like turning a caterpillar into a butterfly. But when done wrong, all you have is a really fast caterpillar. And that's to say that digital transformation is really a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. So what we're going to be talking today, all these tools that I'm going to be showing, don't expect to just turn it on and take a look at it and have a solution. Really, these tools are meant to nurture your journey. And as I mentioned, IT may have access to these things, but you're here as a decision maker or a success owner. Maybe you manage Microsoft 365 applications. But really just keep in mind that it does take time and it's not going to happen overnight. Depending where you are in your adoption journey, there are different techniques that you can incorporate for each of these different tools. So maybe you're in the beginning of your transformation journey, whether you're envisioning your transformation, what you're going to do with these Microsoft 365 tools, who should be your champions, what should be your success criteria, or maybe you've already started onboarding and training people. Maybe you're here and you joined us today because you're trying to drive value. You've already onboarded everybody and you're trying to take it to the next steps and use it by using these tools, right? So One of the things that I will cover first actually is the productivity score, and it's very exciting. It still is in infancy within the Microsoft space as compared to other reporting tools that are out there. But the productivity score is more than just a reporting tool. Okay, so Microsoft essentially recognized that organizations need to understand where they are in their digital transformation journey, and as well as thinking about how the technology that you have, can support them in this journey so that you can get the most out of your Microsoft 365 investments. That's why really the productivity score was built, right? So you're here to make certain decisions, and you want to know what options you have, and the productivity score is a really, really great place to start. So in its foundation, the productivity score is composed of 3 areas, and the first one is visibility. So visibility is going to help you understand your digital transformation journey. It's encompassed of 2 key areas. One is your people experience. How are people experiencing your Microsoft 365 solutions? And your technology experience, and how is technology helping to supplement from a network and health perspective. So for your people side, really Microsoft is looking to help people transform the work they get done. It's not about how much they're using it. That's not what the productivity score is for. It's really how are they using it, and as well as the technology, how can you make sure that technology is being optimized so that your network and your applications are supporting your staff. So that's one of the main components. The next is insights. So the productivity score you'll see today includes insights that can help you identify and enable improved experiences. For example, I get a lot of customers that ask me, how do I move people away from using attachments in emails versus a link in the cloud? And that's where it comes with actions, where you will get a set of recommendations from Microsoft that you can incorporate. So whether that's adding certain training within for your staff, updating their skills, or maybe IT has to make a certain change within your Microsoft 365 environment. Okay, so then once you take all of these actions, you have your visibility, your insights, and your actions. You can go back, and this is circular. It's an ever-lasting journey, right? Your digital adoption journey. So you may be wondering, where can I get the productivity score? And I'm going to share that with you right now. I'm going to pull up an environment, and then I'm going to come back to these slides. So just give me a moment while I do that. Okay. Let me come here and share. Oops. Share monitor 1. Okay. So we will talk about access later on, but quickly I'm just going to share with you how you can get to it. From office.com, I can go into my app launcher and go into the administration area, right? Administration area is usually where IT spends a lot of their time, but guess what? You don't need to be IT to come in here and get access to certain things, right? So to get to the productivity score, on the left-hand side, you have your reports. There's a section for productivity score, which we're going to review today, your usage, and later on, we're going to go through the message center as well. One thing to know, productivity score is soon it's going to be generally available, but if you don't have, if you click on productivity score, you may have to click a button to turn it on, and it just takes 24 hours to show all of your data. Okay, so moving on, I'm actually going to flip back to the slides, and as I have better examples there that I'm going to walk you through. So let me go in here and go back to my slides. All right. So now that you understand where it exists, again, we'll talk about the access. Let's go into the details of the productivity score. So today I am logged in as a success manager, what you see here on the screen. My organization that I have for you here today started their adoption journey just a few months ago in summer of 2020, right? So this organization specifically is still, it's in infancy. When we look on the top right-hand corner, immediately you're giving a score. That's your productivity score. That's what it's called. This organization has 68%, and underneath it, you get a total score out of a set amount of points. Okay, so for you to understand this, essentially the numerator up here at the top are the number of points that I obtained across the people area and the technology. Each different area has a certain amount of points, and the denominator here at the bottom is the maximum number of points I could obtain depending on the licenses or services that you have. So every organization is going to be different. For example, some organizations may have Intune and some organizations may not have it. So these points differ. So outside of just these points, you're also you also have a scale based on you're compared based on your peers. And you may be wondering who are your peers, and those are other organizations similar to you based on your size, your industry, your region, and the licenses. Okay, so this organization here is doing exceedingly well compared to its peers. So it's definitely going above and beyond. Of course, you can always increase that 68%, but this is looking really great. And if you're wondering how is it being calculated here, when I mentioned the different points, the people experience, right? I talked about it a little bit earlier. You're given a set of points for each different categories, such as your communication, your meetings, content collaboration, and your teamwork, right? So you can actually drill down into each of those and see how you're doing across each of them. And again, I just want to mention that really productivity score isn't, you know, it's not about how many people are using these, the applications, right? Is how productive are people, the people side and the technology side of your Microsoft 365 environment. Moving on, another thing that you can take a look at as part of your digital transformation is that it's the journey life cycle. So you have a quick snippet of 180 days, and you can kind of see where you started and where you are today. Hopefully you're treading up and not down, but of course, if you're treading down, then that's a great way for you to investigate. Okay. All right, still at the high level here, I'm going to show you a screenshot of the entirety of the productivity score landing page. It's a bit hard for me to show you, but let me start here at the top. So we did cover the right-hand side, which gets you the organization score, your components, your history, and then on the left-hand side, there's a special report that I'm going to walk through a little bit later on. Not every organization gets this, but this was a new report that came out when essentially due to the pandemic to help you measure how people are doing during their remote work, their wellness, etc. The main areas here, there's 5, essentially for the people experience and technology experience, you have two different categories. But your communication is a great way to see how are people communicating, what are their different styles, how are people meeting, how long are their meetings taking, and of course there's a bunch of examples. How are people collaborating? Are they using OneDrive or SharePoint Online? What is the mechanism in teamwork for people to share information? How are they collaborating? What is their mobile experience? So all of those, you have different categories that you can actually drill down to, and I'm going to focus on today content collaboration, a little bit of meetings, and then at the bottom, as I mentioned, endpoint analytics. That's depends on your organization if you have Intune or not, your application health, your network connectivity, and then the business continuity. Okay, so there's a lot on here, but it's simplified because Microsoft essentially references a lot of their research that they've conducted and also provides those insights and actions that I mentioned earlier on. So let's take a look at content collaboration as an example. Okay, so when I click into one of those boxes for people experience, we have content collaboration. I'm not going to touch on everything, but I really want to focus on a few key points here. So, for example, content collaboration shows you how are people collaborating with their Office files. For example, this organization that I'm part of, there's 81% of people actually using Office files, which is great, right? We don't want people to, we're going to have Microsoft 365. We don't want people to use a bunch of other things, and we want them to take advantage of what they have. So here I can see how many people are readers, and reading meaning your OneDrive or your SharePoint files, how many people are creating documents, and how many people are collaborating against those documents. So it's really based on how frequently they're creating, reading, and collaborating. But and I mentioned you may be wondering, like, why does this stuff matter? Up at the top, Microsoft always gives you some mini statistics or links to their research that you can actually read, and that can help you with your insights. Okay. And down at the bottom of this, or the middle section, excuse me, there's a couple of things that I want to point out. And this section is explore how your organization collaborates, and there's a couple of other examples. My organization here, there's 79% of people who are using Office to create files in OneDrive or SharePoint. That's great, but of course this can be better. There's still a couple of people out of 87 that should be taking advantage of it. My all-time favorite one here in the middle that I love reviewing with my clients is, you know, how are people sharing their files? Interestingly enough, this organization, 100% of people are sharing their files as email attachments, which is a no-go. Really, we want them to be linking to online files or embedding links. And why? It's a red flag because the purpose of the cloud and to have links and to link online files is that so you don't have multiple versions of documents or conflicting changes or anything like that. So this is definitely a red flag. So if I'm looking at this as a consultant or from perspective of a success manager, decision maker, I'm investing so much on Microsoft 365, but people are not taking advantage of versioning, and actually they shouldn't be attaching physical files unless there's some exceptions, right? And then lastly here I see, okay, 1% of people are sharing content externally. Maybe some organizations don't want people to share certain things externally, so this can kind of give me visibility into that. And then lastly, as part of the content collaboration down at the bottom, I can see that 61% of people collaborate on 4 or more Office files. But again, they're not using those Office files to email, which there's some issues there. You can actually click on view related content underneath, and you get a bunch of videos and training videos and materials to help kind of boost the collaboration in your office space. So you get here playlists, you get videos, you get articles, and you can incorporate that as part of maybe your training modules as an example. Okay, moving on. Meetings is a really hot topic right now, of course. And I did cover the content collaboration. I mentioned I'm going to quickly cover the meetings under people experience. And a couple of good examples here that I like to point out is that this specific organization has a lot of people sharing their videos, which is awesome, right? That encourages conversation and morale and everything like that, instead of turning off your video and everyone is kind of disconnected. So that's really awesome that this organization is turning on their video. And let's see here. And I can kind of see on the right-hand side how quick some of their this organization's meetings are. 77% of instant meetings are less than 30 minutes long, which is great. You really want to have quick meetings, not meetings that take longer than you anticipated, right? So essentially those covered some of the examples for the people experience, right? We went through the content collaboration, we went through meetings. There is a bunch of other ones out there, but that I quickly passed by, but I'm not gonna walk through them today. The next piece that I'm gonna talk about is the technology experience. Okay, I did mention a couple of examples. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into it. I just won't spend too much time on it. Okay. So next is the network connectivity. And one thing I want to mention is that, you know, you could be really, really good at content collaboration, but maybe your network isn't where it needs to be. And people get discouraged and maybe they don't want to take advantage of the cloud, or they say things are too slow, or there's always outages, whatever it is, right? So maybe in that case, you want to tackle your network before the rest of your digital transformation. And really, Microsoft wants you to see both sides of the coin. They want you to see the people side. They want you to have that technology experience because they do complement each other. Okay, so in this specific example, just like with your productivity score, you also have an assessment based on your Exchange, your SharePoint, and your Microsoft Teams. You also have your history of your connectivity performance. You see your offices, where your offices are and how they're performing. You can actually drill down into each of the locations. And then underneath it are recommended actions that you should take. You can actually click into each of these, as well as what requires for further research. For example, this one says 50% of the devices we test for your organization have poor connection to Exchange. So that's definitely something that maybe you as a decision maker may not tackle, but you can work with your IT so that these issues get resolved and you can prevent some bigger issues happening, right? Okay. And then another part of the technology experience, this isn't for every organization. Some organizations have this if you have Intune, as I mentioned. But let's say that, you know, your PC takes like 5 minutes, several minutes to boot up, and that could be really problematic and really disruptive to your users and their workflow. So there's something called Endpoint Analytics, and you can kind of see the startup performance, and you also have a score against that. So that is something that you can inquire about, especially if you hear people or you're experiencing it yourself. If you have, as I mentioned, if you have Intune, but this is really meant to optimize your device experiences, whether you're on your phone or whatever it is, so that like your help desk issues can be resolved and your network and everything is, and all of your applications are working properly together. So they're harmonizing together. Okay, so we reviewed the people experience, the technology experience. The last thing that I want to cover when it comes to the productivity score is the business continuity. And as I mentioned, this is pretty new. It was a response due to the pandemic. And let me try to zoom in here. Really, this report, I believe you have to have about a little over 100 Exchange Online users to have this report. Not every organization is going to have it, but this report really provides insight into how effective your remote meetings are, how are people kind of feeling in a way. It'll help you answer some of those questions. How are they collaborating? So here you can kind of see some questions. How is collaboration changing since the remote work started? Are employees maintaining their well-being, as an example? So a great thing to look at, and Microsoft has done some great research on this, is how are people spending time throughout the day? When are they working most? At what time are they working throughout the day? And of course, their research found that most people are working later and longer, right? So you may want to take some action there to avoid burnout, as an example. So let's see here. I want to. Okay. Yep, and you can also, on the right-hand side, you can take actions and work on remediating any of those issues or concerns and helping your employees. So everything within this environment, the productivity score area is really meant for you to get that visibility, the insights, and for you to take action. There's a couple of resources that I would recommend for you to take a look at when it comes to the productivity score. These resources break down all of the numerators and denominators and how the scores are being calculated for all of the different areas. There's a ton of things, resources and blogs and things that you can read. So do take advantage of these links here. So now that we've covered the productivity score, I'm going to move over to the usage side, which is not necessarily as exciting, but it is something good to take a look at as part of your adoption journey. So as I mentioned, on the left-hand side, there's productivity score, and then there's your usage underneath it. Okay. So right away, this is another area that you can have access to. I can see how many people are using the services, right? So the productivity score is really about the how they're using it. This is like the how many are actually using these different applications. So for example, I can see, and actually I can actually hover over each of these and get more details, but I can see all of, for example, SharePoint. I see this organization is not using Yammer at all, but if maybe there are, let's say you really wanted SharePoint, you launched it, you want people to get excited, but then you're looking at the numbers and you're saying, wait, people aren't actually using it, what's going on? You can kind of investigate and try to add on different tactics, right? You can see Microsoft Teams is here. That's definitely a hot application right now. And let's move on from this one. Oh, excuse me. Just needed to go here. As I said, you can actually drill down. So if I clicked on Microsoft Teams, I can see on the left-hand side, as a good example, how many people are sending channel messages, how many people are chatting, one-on-one calls. And I will say that if you're starting, let's say if you're just launching Microsoft Teams and people are solely chatting and not using their channels, then that's definitely a red flag, and that's something that I'd like to look into, especially if you've trained people and you've communicated and you've done all that you can, but people are just spending so much time on the chat instead of opening it up and really taking advantage of what Teams is meant to be. Okay, so that is an area that I like to look at. And so we covered the productivity score and the usage area. So the next last thing that I'm going to cover in the demonstration is the message center. Okay. So I'm going to stop presenting this and I'm going to go back into my environment. So just give me a moment. Okay. Come back here. I think monitor one. Yes. Okay. All right. So yes, we covered the productivity score. We covered the usage area. And the last thing that I want to cover is the message center. So the message center is traditionally a lot of IT use it to get certain alerts of what is coming to your environment. But I highly recommend anyone that's again, decision maker or success manager to take advantage of this area. And I'll show you a couple of things here. So essentially, Microsoft communicates with everyone on what's coming out or things that you have to do within your environment in the message center. So I can see a couple of messages here with icons of what message, what application this will affect. Since we're talking about reporting and all of these different tools, I'm going to open up one of these and show you what it looks like. So here it says new usage report for Microsoft Teams in Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Great, what does that mean? So I can see when it was last published, not too long ago. I can see the details of what is coming out as well as the roadmap, associated roadmap, when this is happening, how it's going to affect my organization. So I can actually see, and I'll show you another report in just a moment, that the Teams usage report shows tenant level aggregates and per team level details. Right now, you don't get that. You just get, as I showed you in the screenshots, just how many channel messages and just high level things, but not the actual team level details. Okay, so great, it has a screenshot of the preview, and then it tells me what do I need to do to prepare. So this is a really great area where, again, if you're trying to update your maybe training material or you're trying to communicate with your users, if you're a champion or whatever it is, this is a great place to share it with people, and you can post it in Teams. My team and I do that a lot, especially as consultants, to help each other stay up to date or not necessarily use the roadmap all the time. We can go in here and use that. So, excuse me, this is in my way. Yep. And of course, I can see all the other ones. I can keep scrolling. I can see what's highly important, anything that I have not read. And my favorite that is part of here is the planner syncing. So Planner is a task management tool that you can add into your Microsoft Teams. And let's say that you have a certain task, maybe to your champion, to tell them, hey, please, do like a lunch and learn or tips and trick or something like that. And you can actually sync this to Planner and assign those out to certain people with deadlines, etc. So again, this is all in administration center. It's really, really, really important. And it gives you also when you should act by, it gives you certain days, categories, and some tags, and you can search for things in here. So all really, really exciting. I love the message center. It helps me stay up to date, me and my team stay up to date. Okay. So now let's go back to my trusty slides here. Okay. For access requests, right? So now you're wondering, Lamia, how can I get access? There's a couple of different roles. The main one that really you should take advantage of is that reports reader. And you can see those reports, you can see and click them and walk through them if you get reports reader. And these are all read-only mode. So they're specifically meant for business owners, business users, etc. Message center, that's a different one that you can request IT to give you access. Usage summary, reports reader. So these are some the main ones that I would recommend, or if you prefer to have global reader, you can do that as well. But really, I encourage all of IT, and most of my clients that I speak to do not know that their IT has access to this. So they get really excited that they can actually be more hands-on and make better decisions based on reviewing and having insights to these tools. So just a moment ago, I did share with you guys the message center and the news that you're going to have like team level Microsoft Teams level details. Where is that coming from? I will say that within the administration area, one of the areas that you won't have a role and you won't have access to, but you can request IT to send you reports and things, is the Microsoft Teams Administration Center. So Teams has its own administration center if you're using that. And within the Teams Administration Center, you get a bunch of different data in here. So my favorite is definitely Teams usage and Teams user activity. So essentially what Microsoft is trying to do right now is try to pull some of that information from here into the usage reporting so that you don't have to depend on your IT to give you, there's a little Excel or screen captures each time. Okay, so this, you can't have access to it, but you can work with your IT, or if they're comfortable to give you admin level access, then it's up to them. So a couple of things for Microsoft Teams, and then we're gonna wrap it up with some of my key questions and things like that, and we'll open it up for Q&A. So there's a couple of things that I can see here, and the ones that I love, I will point out. Okay, so typically when my clients start their Microsoft Teams journey, one of my number one complaints, quote unquote, is that people aren't getting notifications, right? There's notifications for your settings that you can work on, but really Microsoft Teams is driven by people using mentions, using the @ symbol, right? Just like in social media, right? So something I often like to look at is the mentions. Are people actually taking advantage? Did we train them properly? Did we communicate? Did we post some tips and tricks? And that helps to drive our understanding if, people are kind of not getting the notifications. Maybe they're just not being mentioned. Maybe their colleague or staff members aren't posting correctly. Overall, I can kind of see, are people posting messages? Are they taking advantage of those channels, right? And the chats, with my preferences, channels over over chats. And how many meetings are being organized? How many urgent messages are being sent out? And I've had urgent messages being sent out for organizations that are in the field and require more critical attention. So maybe you train them on urgent messages and they're not taking advantage of it. So those are kind of the types of things that I like to take a look at, because again, you can have the technology, you can release it out to people, but if they're not understanding or they're not on board, etc., then they're not going to be using it as effectively, if at all. Okay. So this is the Teams, Microsoft Teams Administration Center. So we've covered a couple of different areas. These are all just a bunch of tools with lots of data and pretty charts and things, but it really comes down to you pulling it together and making it, bringing it into your plan and executing. Okay. So a couple of things to mention before you really use these tools, and these are just high-level types of questions. And this typically helps me determine where you are in your adoption and change journey. And hopefully it can kind of help you so that before you tackle all of these tools and grab them and request access, make sure some of these questions are answered. So the very first one is, has your Microsoft 365 technology been part of your sponsor's vision or change, or any of your change programs, right? If you have an active sponsor, executive sponsor that's putting it out there, that's encouraging it during your town halls or whatever it is, then that's only going to help propel some of your cloud vision. Or is it also maybe Microsoft Teams part of other change programs that you have? Maybe you have a like unified vision type of communication, something that you want to get out and say, okay, with our unified and communication and our remote work, we're going to use Microsoft Teams to help us get there, etc. Do people understand why these tools are there and what they should be doing? Do they have the skills and resources? Do you need to maybe change up some jobs or skill sets? Do you have champions? Have you thought about your change network? Are they motivated? Do they have the tools? Are they rewarded? Are they recognized? Do you have a mechanism for feedback, right? For getting feedback on your, maybe on your technology or digital transformation journey, or your training? Are you sending out surveys? Are you following up with people? Think about who should have access. Maybe not just you in the C-suite, but you want to designate some people to be those success owners for your Microsoft 365 application. And how frequent should you be looking at these as the reports, and how frequently should you be reviewing? And lastly, and importantly, is what are your success criteria and what are your KPIs that you can set so that you can take a look at your adoption journey throughout time and have a baseline that you can work out of. Okay, so those are just some examples of questions that I typically work with my clients on, or if you think about it before you pull in these tools, because the tools are great, but without the thought leadership and without answering some of these questions and putting them into practice, then you'll kind of flatline in your and your scores and your usage, and etc. So of course, I will say with the remote work that we have right now and the pandemic, of course, a lot of organizations are forced to use a lot of these tools, but we don't want that mindset, right? We want to flourish and to grow your digital transformation. Despite maybe last year having to be rushed, this is a new year, and that's why we wanted to put this webinar together so that you can kind of breathe. We started a new year. Let's see how these tools can help support you and your organization. So that's it for me right now, Sasha.
Thank you.
I will open it up for questions.
All right. Let's see.
We actually have 15 minutes, right on time.
Good. We do have a question in all of these tools. Is there a recommended timeline? I guess is what we're asking for when you should start looking at this after implementing the technology?
Yep. So what I'll say is that I'll kind of start a different way. If let's say that you haven't started your adoption journey or really doing much of anything, what I would recommend is starting off with those success criteria and those KPIs, and enabling the productivity score and seeing where you are and kind of coming up with some KPIs based on your understanding. But of course, you can do that even after. If you've never done that before, I still recommend that you do come up with some KPIs to help you get there. It's the other part of the answer is really it depends on the groups that you have. So let's say if you have champions that meet like monthly, then I would recommend, maybe the champions or the success owners putting reports together for executive level. So it just depends on the role that you have there. The message center, again, also depends on like the audience that the people that are actually taking on this adoption journey. But from the IT perspective, message center definitely should be a daily. But let's say your champions or your success owners should definitely be on the weekly, because Microsoft comes out with things so frequently. And the last thing that I want to mention for the productivity score, for example, you have to keep in mind that the scale is based on like 28 days, or the historical is 180 days, I believe. So you may want to time it so that you can kind of look at it in those different snapshots. So it really doesn't matter where you are in your adoption journey necessarily, but make sure to have your KPIs if you haven't set those. Maybe you want to say, in 6 months we want a 25% reduction of people attaching things via email, because we have Teams, we have email, we have so many different things. We want to push that down, right? Or operational costs, whatever it is. So that would be my recommendation. And I typically work with my clients on coming up with solid schedules, like actual schedules, and following up on those. So just depends on your organization who's involved. But yeah, that answers.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty much all we have for questions. And that was a lot of good information. We do have just one last quick poll. If anybody has any questions, sorry, if anybody has any questions, that come up after the session, we're happy to answer them. Just quickly, this will help us not bug you with follow-ups, but if you're interested to talk to us to discuss your challenges and questions, please let us know. You can always change your mind, where to find us. Lamia will share a link in just a second. So just give it a second. All right. Thank you, everyone. And go ahead, Lamia, I'll let you close out.
Yeah, it's feel free to use this link or find me on LinkedIn, but you can book some time with me, 30 minutes, and we can talk about where you are, what your vision is, and how I can help you and how my team can help you as well. I'm open if you use this link, calendly.com/Lamia Sadek, first name, last name. You can find my available times.
Great. Thank you, Lamia. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, everybody.